I think that when I write a book, I'm writing a movie. I see it on the inside of my eyelids somehow, and I write down what I see. I generally have a fairly vague idea about what the characters look like, and usually the first person that illustrates the character, I say, yes, that's about right. But I hear their voices perhaps more than see their faces.
I'm giving my life to music.
It's very difficult for an author to get too involved in something as three-dimensional as cartoon animation. I don't know how to do it. I think in terms of a word processor, I think you can actually cut in things and splice things together very easily, and it isn't quite so easy to do that when you're paying X amount per second to do animation. So what I like to do is find people who I think are really competent at what they do and let them do it without looking over their shoulder too much. But yes, we have had meetings about how particular characters sounded and how they ought to look, and I've taken up source material and say, that character should look a bit like this, or should sound a bit like this, or the actor I had in mind when I wrote that particular character was so-and-so. And that's actually worked extremely well. But ultimately, I find that if you let them get on with it, they delight and surprise me.
What's that you got there?
Maybe it's because I am a writer. I've listened to the voices rather than looked at the images on the screen. And Christopher Lee, as the voice of Death, is absolutely superb. I don't think he could possibly be better. He has that same kind of patrician, slightly tired voice, which is just so apposite for the role. And I particularly like Deborah Gillett as Susan, Death's granddaughter. Again, the voice is pitched exactly right.
What's it all about? Seriously, when you get down to it.
I don't have another grandfather. At least I don't think so. I'm not sure.
One of the nice aspects of working with Cosgrove Hall is that periodically I've received this tape in the post and I haven't known what to expect. And what particularly sticks in my mind is the voice of Cliff, the troll drummer. I didn't know how he spoke, and then it turned out he had a jazz man's voice, and it was absolutely right. Then they coupled that with the sound effect, so that when he moves, it sounds like bits of rock sliding past each other. And the voice and the shape go well. It's a marriage made in some kind of animation heaven somewhere. And I hadn't thought of Glod the dwarf as a short, perky Liverpudlian. And that works. And then they actually found some jokes that worked particularly well because he was a Liverpudlian. So I'd say again, it's the poetry of the voices that I really appreciate.
Cliff?
Good troll name, very stony.
Cliff? I can't see anyone lasting long in this business with a name like Cliff.
It's better than Glod.
I nearly burst into tears when I heard the Soul Music soundtrack. I played it again and again, and I said, I don't care if it's not legal. I want a copy of this tape to take out of the building. Because it's a work of genius. I don't know how, but they managed in 7 or 8 tracks to encapsulate a history of rock music. And there's lots of little musical gags in there. You hear just one chord, and that's Beatles. It's going to be a Beatles number. And here is the generic 60s flower power track. And as a musician friend remarked, not only have they got the sound right, they've got the tech right as well. So there's the flanging and all the other bits of trickery that you would have got that time. They are sort of parody tracks, but also they're good tracks in their own right. And you think, hang on, that's a bit of Cream, isn't it? No, maybe that's Yes. Hang on, is that Dire Straits there? And it suggests without ever being these other groups and other sounds. And at the same time, they're actually good songs in their own right. In fact, the only thing that worries me is that the music is so good that sometimes the words and the actions are going to get in the way. I sincerely hope that the tracks are released as an album in their own right. They deserve to be. It's ever so tempting to say, wouldn't it be a good idea to write a movie script, or wouldn't it be a good idea to script an entirely new Discworld series? And then I think, well, a man ought to know his limitations. I think I'm pretty good in a very limited way at what I do, so why should I go off somewhere and be a mediocre scriptwriter? Adapting books is a very precise art, and I don't think I ought to think that just because I can write the book okay, I can do the adaptation well as well. You actually need a whole different range of disciplines. I have been tempted, but when I sober up a bit, I tend to think, well, maybe my job is to just carry on keeping the Discworld going, you know, providing the basic engine, doing the books and having the prime ideas, and let some other guys earn a decent living doing some adaptations. People often ask whether you know, Discworld is a real place to me. I have to say that if Discworld was a real place to me, I would be candidate for the rubber room and the white canvas blazer with the optional long sleeves. It is real to me in a way. I have to take it seriously, and I love writing about it, but it is something that I am creating. It's my job to make it as real as it possibly can be in your head. It's a fantasy world, but what I try to do is introduce a lot of everyday things into it to flesh it out rather more than the old classic fantasy universe of dragons and heroes was ever fleshed out. So what I do like to do is get echoes of the real world in Discworld, so that readers will say, or viewers will say, yes, that's true, people are like that, people do that sort of thing. People have that kind of expression. Sometimes you do see bits of Discworld in the real world, and that is really weird.
Chamomile tea, sir.
I'd like it very much if people who saw the animation and that was their first introduction to Discworld would then say, I wonder if the book is as good as this. They might actually be disappointed, but if they went out to get the book, I'd be very pleased.
Yes, my son?
This sounds really weird, I know, but the biggest laugh I had out of watching soul music was when someone's nostrils flared on the screen. Quite a bit of complicated piece of animation. The character was upset at that point. And there was this marvellous the face was just full screen for a moment. And I thought, this is magnificent. Whoever did this wanted to get something absolutely right. It's a little detail. It's so good that you won't actually notice it's being done. I've never seen an animated face outside a sort of multi-million-dollar animation move like that. And soul music and Weird Sisters as well are full of this sort of little thing. Little sound effects that are absolutely right. And you hear them once, you don't hear them again for the whole of the series, but that doesn't matter because they did their job. And there's a character in the background or something down in the corner of a thing, and it happens and it's very funny, and you don't actually even realise that it's there. And it's been done by some guy who didn't really care whether no one saw it but him and his mum and his girlfriend, and it was done for the sheer love of the thing. And when you get an accumulation of those sorts of things, you just get a marvellous production. At the moment, around the place, you can get readings by professional actors of Discworld books. There are these animations. There's Discworld music, and it sounds very strange to say that I can listen and watch these things and actually enjoy what I've done. You probably do need medical attention when you burst out laughing and then you go and look in the book and you think, I wrote that joke. But now I'm seeing someone deliver that joke, and I'm seeing the setting for that joke, and I'd forgotten that I wrote it anyway because it was a good few years ago. And that particular scene actually works for me. There's a scene in soul music which is very sad, and I felt a lump in my throat. And I thought, I remember writing that. I remember putting it in the book, and I moved this bit around, and it was a job of work at the time to get it exactly as I wanted it to be. And suddenly it's been taken away and people have added value to it in various ways and presented it to me again, and I'm enjoying it. I felt I ought to pay these guys for doing this. They shouldn't be paying me. Lots and lots of things are happening. They're happening all the time, and a Discworld movie is going to happen. I'm not entirely certain when, and there are things that are still being settled, but that's going to happen. I'm pretty certain that more animations are going to happen because the future is quite a big place. The fact is, though, that I'm one guy, and if I spent all my time running around trying to get this to happen and that to happen, I wouldn't have as much time just to sit there and, for want of a better word, be the engine that drives the whole thing along. I'm often asked whether the characters I write about are based on people I know, and I say, well, not really, because I don't live next door to an orangutan, and a 7-foot skeleton isn't, my constant companion.
You're my best friend.
But it's true to an extent. There are 1 or 2 characters in the entire Discworld series that are based very nearly on one person. Most of them are based on types of people, and that tends to work very well because people will write to me and say, I know someone who's just like character X. And that's because character X is a type, and you'll find a type like that person practically anywhere in the world.
Oh, I love touring, me. The places you see, the people you meet, the open road.
It was completely fortuitous that Josh Kirby started illustrating the Discworld books. I think Transworld got hold of the manuscript of Colour of Magic and thought, this is a weird book, let's find a weird cover artist. And the covers have worked extremely well. But Josh does his own thing. I talk to him usually before he does every cover, and we just discuss various things. But he's got his job to do. He's got to produce the best cover that he can. And I've got to produce the best book that I can. And Cosgrove Hall have got to produce the best animation that they can, and you can't animate a Josh Kirby figure. It's animated anyway, just the way it sits there. So I'd say again that I believe in that if you're dealing with an artist, even if it's in a completely different discipline, you let them do it their way. To have a large fan following is to have a very large number of critics, because I think if Discworld works for people, it works because I make it happen in their heads. And so everyone provides their own sound effects, and everyone provides their own actors. And when you see it on the screen, it's been pinned down. Somehow, suddenly there is the definitive Death or the definitive Susan. And I don't know how many people will agree with that Death and that Susan and that Buddy and that Cliff. That doesn't worry me too much. The important thing is that they should be good for what they are. They're never going to be everyone's perfect realisation of the character, but you can still look at them and say, that's not how I imagined them, but it's a damn good representation nevertheless. Judging by the response so far, I think people will be very happy.
Excuse me, I don't want to cause any trouble, right, but is this Death or not? I mean, I've seen pictures and they don't look like her.
It's a strange thing that while the fans respond to suggestions of a full-length movie with general cries of alarm and despondency, an animation doesn't seem to worry people anything like as much. I would say that almost all the fan mail and the email that's been turning up about this has been very positive. People are looking forward to it. At worst, it's going to be good. At its best, it's going to be superb. I think that Cosgrove Hall have got a very good name as well. You know, people remember Danger Mouse and my personal favourite, Count Duckula, and the fans will remember the Truckers series they did, which was superb. So I don't think anyone's particularly worried about it. And I remember at the Discworld convention, Cosgrove Hall showed some rough cuts, and they really were rough. And Mark Hall was very apologetic and saying, you know, we've got to have to do this and we're going to have to do that. And there was a voice at the back of the hall that said, you mean it's going to be better? And everyone cheered. So no, I think people are very positive about it. I think it's probably true to say that Discworld sells pretty well everywhere that it sells. It's lagged for a few years in the United States for a whole complicated bundle of reasons. But I've got a new publisher there and things have started to move very well in the last few years. There are kind of odd things. I don't know why it's doing so well in Sweden at the moment. But I'm getting a lot of fan mail from Sweden. It does extremely well in Germany. It's doing phenomenally well in Australia, which always strikes me as kind of weird, you know, because it's a different sort of country. But I get mail from all over the place now, because even in the countries where there is not a local edition, the English editions find their way in. I mean, I was astonished last year to go and do a couple of signings in Prague. And up to that point, I probably would not have been able to find Prague on a map of Europe first try. And suddenly there was this 4-hour queue, and they had to shut the shop doors, you know, to stop more people getting in. I don't know why. I'm told that the Czech language and the English language are both languages in which you can play lots of tricks with words, and the translator was very good. But I was classically gobsmacked by this. So it tends to find loyal fans in every country. It's taken a long time for Discworld to get on the screen for all kinds of reasons. One of them is that I'm an author. I think in terms of the written word. And I get kind of nervous about, it's like sort of your child growing up. You know, I get a bit nervous about letting Discworld go out into the big world and come under other people's control because, as I've said, I don't know how to animate, I don't know how to put a soundtrack together. I have to trust other people to do these things right. I know that Cosgrove Hall would like to do a lot of others, and as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. I think there may be different animation techniques that could be used with different books. It would be I've said to Cosgrove Hall I'd like to get more involved because it's a bit like having a train set. I can actually influence all this stuff. I hope there are going to be more. I get kind of nervous, though, when talking about this sort of thing, because people tend to suggest that if your book hasn't made it onto a screen somewhere, it's kind of not like a real book. People say, what, is there a movie in prospect then? Like, well, yeah, if there's a movie, that's nice. It doesn't mean that much extra money, it means more people buy the book. But I tend to think of it as words, first of all. Words which start off in my head, get written down on paper and end up in your head. And the bonus for me is you provide the scenery, you provide the soundtrack, all in your own head. All I have to do is play around with 26 letters of the alphabet and a handful of punctuation, and then you do all the work in your imagination. The books do take place in my head as a kind of movie, a bit jerky, and I stop and start and I redo things. And there are a lot of scenes that I see, and I write them down effectively as I see them, in the hope that I can make you see them as well. And there are some scenes that I would love to see televised on a big screen somewhere, because I have them so clear in my head. The only way we could do it properly, though, is by fixing some kind of wire into my brain directly into the machine. But there's a lot of good visual activity in the Discworld books. Some books, I think, would make good movies, some would make good plays. There's probably one that would make a good opera. It's always a big leap of faith when you get involved in something like this. I get on extremely well with Cosgrove Hall, much better than I thought I would. I phone them up and say, that isn't quite right. And they say, oh, we'll do something about it. You know, we had sort of long arguments about what kind of boots a witch would wear. When I say arguments, possibly we would say animated discussions. And I found that they would actually listen to what I said. It wasn't a case of me just handing over a book, getting some money, and then just sitting there waiting to see what was going to happen next. I do let them get on with things. And the visits I've made to their studio, it's like going to Disneyland. They just sit me down and say, this is how so-and-so talks. And I say, I want to hear more about this. You know, it's getting to the point where I'd almost employ them just to make the videos for me. It'd be very expensive, and they'd turn up on a kind of gold box. But I almost think of it like that. I'm on the phone to them all the time saying, come on, we're only up to episode 5. I want to see the rushes for episode 6. There hasn't been anything about what I've seen so far that I disagree with. There have been little things in an earlier stage where I've said, that doesn't work. That light can only work if you use electricity, and there's no electricity on the Discworld, and there are other little continuity things that we've had to alter. But it's been real fun and very, very enjoyable. I think I've probably got more out of soul music by letting Cosgrove Hall do its own thing to a great extent. There are some things for both of the books they're currently working on where I have laid down the lore a bit about the look of one or two characters or how they speak and things like that. Beyond that, I've really let them do their own thing, and I've got a lot more out of it, because it's as if there's all these guys working away to do something that's really going to please me. I think if I'm happy with it, a lot of other people are going to be as well.
If you go out there, you'll be mobbed.
I can't stand this. Stuck in this hotel room. It's driving me crazy.
What you gonna do? Hey, nice! What do you call the colour on the door?
Old and nil.
The curtains are good too.
Thank you.
There was a case in New Zealand a couple of years ago where a thief broke into a bookshop and stole the contents of the till and one each of all of my books. He couldn't have been a really keen fan, because if he was, he'd have left the money and he'd have taken 2 each of all of my books. But I thought that was a kind of a vote of confidence from the criminal fraternity. When people ask me about my fans, I suspect that what they're thinking of is, how can I put it, someone called Adrian who's spotty and age 14. But at the Discworld convention last year, and I think there's going to be another one towards the end of 1998, I think well over half the attendees were female. And there were a number of people there that were drawing their pensions, and quite a large number who were old enough to be Adrian's mum, if I can put it like that. Because the other thing you have to remember is Discworld's been going for, well, technically for 15 years, but certainly for 10. So whatever age people were, if they started reading Discworld 10 years ago, they're 10 years older now. I used to get mail from parents that were introduced to Discworld by their kids. Now I get mail from kids who've been introduced to Discworld by their parents, or by their grandmother in some cases. So whatever was true back in the mid-80s isn't true anymore. When I do signing sessions, you're going to get those people who can afford to queue up for a couple of hours, and that isn't everybody. But if I go and do talks, I look at the audience, and I haven't the faintest idea whether that family are there because they all read the Discworld books, or because the boy or the girl reads the Discworld books and everyone else has come anyway, or whether mum and dad read the Discworld books and have brought the family. There's no way of telling anymore. It appears to be uni-age. When I do a talk, I generally don't make up my mind what I'm going to talk about until 5 seconds beforehand, but I've got about 6 hours of talk of various various types tucked away in my brain, and it just rearranges itself according to the audience, about how I work, about how Discworld got started, and practically anything else that tends to cross my mind. The nice thing about Discworld is that it is a complete world, and in the Discworld series I've been able to do books about the strange growth of rock music. I mean, consider how odd rock music is. Rock and roll is sung about and talked about as if it's some kind of a living thing. You know, it won't fade away, it'll never die. It has a meaning quite apart from a particular type of musical sound. And then consider the large number of people to whom it offered tremendous fame for a few years and then sudden death, as if there was some kind of devil's bargain going on. This is what got me interested in soul music, and I thought, okay, in Discworld I can say, suppose rock and roll is some kind of living force, you know, genuinely live music. But of course I wouldn't be able to do the whole James Dean thing because it's quite hard to die in the wreckage of a burning horse. But you know, I read up a bit about Buddy Holly, and it's amazing how much I found I actually remembered. The thing about Discworld was that although it's a fantasy universe and a kind of descendant of Tolkien's Middle-earth, it's flexible enough to allow me to do that. And then I did a book about religion, and Discworld allowed me to do that as well. In fact, you might say that religion and rock music are only two aspects of the same thing. And I wanted to do a police procedural, and Discworld allowed me to do that. It is a world, and there are a large number of things I can do with Discworld. What has been a very strange phenomenon in recent years is the growth of Discworld as amateur dramatics. There must be at least 50 Discworld plays happening in various parts of the world this year, probably a lot more than that. I probably don't even know about all the ones that are happening. There's ones in Australia and America and Canada, South Africa, I believe. They're now starting to happen in Germany. This really astonishes me, and I get a bigger kick out of that than I do out of, shall we say, screen media, because 30 people are spending several months in some drafty hall somewhere trying to bring Discworld to life, and it is live, it's there on the stage, and it's amazing the special effects you can achieve when you've got no budget whatsoever. Shakespeare was able to do it, put a handful of guys on the stage and there's the Battle of Agincourt. It depends on how you use the language and how you use the fourth wall, and I've got very interested in that. I suppose I'd love to do the ultimate Discworld movie. You know, a huge budget and everyone had to do what I said. I think the chances of that happening are remote.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with K.
Cabbage.
Your turn.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with a K.
Cabbage.
Things are happening, and I quite like letting them happen. And one bloke. At the moment, you can buy Discworld scarves, T-shirts, candles, models, music, videos, comics, cross-stitch embroidery patterns. Yes, that one caught me a bit unawares as well, but yes, you can. And there's other stuff happening all the time. And in the middle of this, there's one guy who's me, who every day sits down at the keyboard and tries to keep the whole thing going. In a way, it's a great deal of fun, but it's also like being a goalie in a goalmouth that's half a mile wide. You're constantly saying, well, whoever had to have thought about cross-stitch embroidery patterns? Big thing, cross-stitch embroidery, oh, it's the coming thing. And you know, people say, is this the right kind of candle? Yeah, I suppose so. Is this model how you imagine someone? There's a lot for me to do, so I have to keep thinking, maybe it's just my job to be out there, like, ahead of the colonists, coming up with the new ideas and new stories, and that other people are going to make the models, hopefully make the movies, the adaptations, adapt the plays and all the rest of it. Because there is something very nice after all that about it just being you and the contents of your own head and the keyboard and the screen, and you let it, you know, There's something kind of pure and simple about that. You don't have to worry about anyone's wages or whether the crew have turned up, you know, or whether the lunch wagon's going to be there in time. It's just this, you know, hacking the new story out of the living rock.
Hello, Pseudopolis!
We've had 2 approaches for a Discworld theme park. How serious they've been, I don't know. And of course, the advantage of a Discworld theme park is that no matter how bad the food was, it would be authentic. I can't really see the dolls sitting there singing "It's a Flat World After All," but we never know what the post is going to bring or what my agent's going to phone up about. It's kind of fun, and it's kind of overpowering. And I can assure you, at the end of the day, what I really crave more than anything else is that quiet time when the phone isn't ringing and I can sit there and write the new stuff.